Brazil, the fifth largest country on Earth, home to more than 200 million people and one of the biggest pride parades on the planet. It's a country that appears to outwardly celebrate diversity, with some of Latin America's most progressive LGBTQ+ protections, but appearances can be deceiving. I'm Rosie Turner, and since 2020, I've been creating online content to help queer women feel more connected, to share the stories that rarely make it into mainstream media. And in a world that feels increasingly divided, amplifying these voices has never felt more important.
Brazil is the country that kills the most LGBTs in the world for more than a decade.
I want to understand what life really looks like for queer women around the world and the trans and non-binary people who stand alongside us. From underground love stories and chosen families to activists fighting for change.
No one should have to choose between loving God and being who they are.
This series dives into the spaces, people, and communities that often go unseen. And yes, sometimes that means doing shots with drag queens at 2 a.m. in the back streets of Bangkok.
Welcome to the Queendom! Yeah!
Braving minus 17 degrees in the Arctic Circle.
1 second. Let me bring up Apple Pay.
Or conducting the sweatiest interview of my career in the House of God. Join me, we have a lot to unpack. For the last 18 years, Brazil has recorded the highest number of murders of trans and gender diverse people anywhere in the world. It's a nation shaped by turbulent politics, from the openly homophobic rhetoric of former President Bolsonaro to the more progressive, yet arguably still problematic, promises of democracy today. Brazil is also one of the most religious countries in the world, with around 80% of people identifying with a faith. For generations, Catholicism has been the dominant influence, but in recent decades, evangelism has grown rapidly. Today, evangelism isn't just a spiritual presence, but an increasingly powerful force shaping Brazil's political landscape. And here in Brazil, religion doesn't just shape belief, it shapes the everyday lives, policies, and politics of the people who reside here.
Anyone that knows me knows how much I love Brazil. I first went there on a work trip in 2023. I really didn't know what to expect, but Brazil for me is very, very special. This time I want to go back with some more intention. I want to understand what queer life is like in Brazil and get underneath it all, the good, the bad, the complicated, because, excuse the pun, but Brazil doesn't really give you a straight answer, but it sure as hell makes you want to keep asking.
So this documentary is taking me back to one of my favourite cities in Brazil, Rio. It's a tourist hotspot, the most visited city in the country, welcoming a staggering 12.5 million visitors a year. In Rio, queerness is visible. Same-sex couples are openly affectionate. Queer beaches, clubs and bars are thriving. And Rio's Pride Parade in Copacabana attracts over 1 million people each year. And that sense of openness is reflected in Brazilian law. On paper, the country has some of the most progressive LGBTQ+ protections in Latin America, including legal same-sex marriage since 2013. Yet despite Rio being one of Brazil's largest and most open cities, with international eyes on it, this queer-friendly image doesn't represent all of Brazil. Step outside this bubble and the picture becomes more complicated. 1 in 4 Brazilians live below the poverty line, and Rio itself struggles with deep inequality and violence. Gang warfare, unemployment, poverty, limited educational opportunities, and limited police resources all contribute to a harrowing murder rate of more than 20 per 100,000 people, with many crimes likely going unreported. However, efforts by local communities and social programs show that these issues are not permanent and that change is possible. Like so many places around the world, what we see of Rio on social media and travel sites only tells part of the story. Because the truth is, there's no single average Brazilian experience. This is a vast, complex country shaped by politics, religion, and deep social divides. And depending on where you are and who you are, life here can look completely different. To help me make sense of Brazil's political and religious landscape, before I head to Rio, I'm meeting up in London with researcher Paulo, whose work focuses on gender and queer studies.
So just specifically looking at Pride then, and I guess the paradox of Pride in Brazil. Brazil has the largest Pride parade on earth, but there's still incredibly high rates of murder, particularly amongst the queer community, and in particular the trans community. Why do you think that is?
O Brasil é um país controverso, né? Com muitos paradoxos. É um massive country. É um país onde tem ricos e pobres coexistindo lado a lado. É o país que mais consome pornografia de pessoas trans no mundo. É um dos grandes, mas ao mesmo tempo é o país que mais mata pessoas trans no mundo.
As we know, Brazil as a country has some of the most progressive LGBTQ+ rights in South America, equal marriage, adoption laws, and many, many more. But how does that translate to everyday life? Do you feel, as a queer person, that you are supported in Brazil?
Então, assim, depende das regiões, né? Depende da classe social. É muito mais fácil ser branco, né? O problema o STF reconheceu como racismo estrutural, né? Recentemente, que o racismo existe no Brasil e ele é estrutural. Então eu acho que não tem como eu te responder essa questão sem pensar nas pessoas, sem pensar nas diferenças, né? É muito mais fácil, certamente, ser um homem branco, gay, morando na Zona Sul. Não estou falando que é fácil, mas é mais fácil do que você ser um homem preto que mora numa favela, gay, ou uma travesti que mora numa favela, né, preta.
So looking at the political climate of Brazil, in recent years we've seen the presidency of Bolsonaro and the right-wing rhetoric, and now moving into this presidency of Lula and a new chapter in some ways for Brazil. Do you think that Lula's presidency is as radical as it seems on paper?
Eu lembro até hoje, quando o Bolsonaro ganhou, foi horrível. Eu fiquei, acho que 2 semanas sem sair de casa com medo de sair na rua. Então, eu acho que só por isso já impactou, né, as nossas vidas. Eu lembro que naquela primeira semana que o Bolsonaro ganhou, quando ganhou, as pessoas pareciam no Brasil que elas estavam liberadas a sair na rua e a discriminar. É óbvio que quando o Lula ganha, eu acho que dá uma... Só o fato dele ganhar e ser uma oposição a isso já ameniza um pouco. Não estou dizendo que as discriminações acabaram porque estamos divididos. Mas nesse ponto é o que eu tenho a contribuir, eu acho.
So as we know, Brazil is an incredibly religious country, and religion intersects a lot with politics and queerness. I'm just really interested to talk a little bit more about how you think religion impacts on the queer experience of Brazilians.
Eu acho que nos últimos anos, assim, sempre foi um país muito cristão, né? A Igreja Católica sempre foi muito forte no Brasil, mas nos últimos anos, eu acho que dos anos 90, 2000 para cá, um aumento muito grande das igrejas evangélicas pentecostais, e é um movimento que o bolsonarismo, né, ele conversa muito, né? Existem pastores super declarados bolsonaristas. Eu lembro que na eleição de 2018, seguindo a pergunta anterior, eu lembro que tinham igrejas, e aí você vai achar estranho, engraçado, talvez. Engraçado assim do ponto não de graça, de rir. E tinha assim, e isso é muito assustador, como esse movimento, que é um movimento neofascista, né, ele se apropriou de símbolos nacionais do Brasil como se o Brasil fosse ele, ou seja, o que é de esquerda ou o que não conversa com eles não é brasileiro, é comunista, e é uma loucura.
I'm just really interested to understand what you think people get wrong about queerness in Brazil, and if you think that there are any traps that foreign media fall into when they're reporting on issues in the country.
Então eu acho que a mídia internacional não conhece o Brasil, né? Eu acho que como uma música da Elis Regina, que ela interpreta, que é uma grande cantora brasileira, e aí vocês têm que conhecer também a Elis Regina, se vocês não conhecem, o Brasil não conhece o Brasil, né? O Brasil com Z, don't know, Brasil com S, né? Eu acho que a mídia tem muito a conhecer o Brasil. O Brasil é um grande país com um grande potencial, com grandes pessoas, com grande literatura, com grande cinema. Falta, de fato, ter uma dimensão do que é o Brasil e as vidas que estão no Brasil. E né, apesar de tudo isso que a gente está falando de coisas tristes, de coisas de mortes, de estatísticas, mas é um país com muita coisa legal e com muita gente que vale a pena e com muito potencial, com muita alegria, com muito carnaval, com muito axé, com muito samba, com muita capoeira, né, com muita cultura, com muitos povos, com muitas nações. Eu acho que sobre isso, acho que a mídia internacional e o mundo talvez precisem conhecer que há diferentes Brasis dentro de um Brasil, né?
Speaking to Paolo made me realise how much more there is to understand about how politics shapes queer life in Brazil. I've done a lot of my own research to understand the context through the news and political documentaries, but that only ever tells part of the story. Brazil is massive and incredibly diverse, and the only way I'm going to really understand it is to hear from the people living there. So I'm packing my bags and heading back to Rio to meet the people shaping and experiencing queer life there.
I love Brazilians. Not only did the person at customs not even look at me, didn't even look at my passport, just stamped it, you're in, but I also love the fact that health and safety just ceases to exist. I love it. It's free. It's freedom.
This is Lapa, a neighbourhood in Rio long associated with bohemian life, samba and resistance, and still existing today as a hub of nightlife, creativity and social expression. The city is busy at the moment. Everywhere you go, you're surrounded by colour, music and noise. But that's because Rio is preparing for the biggest period of the year, not just in the Brazilian calendar, but on the world stage, Carnaval. Everywhere you look, people are dressing up freely. People of all genders in skirts and glitter, music spilling into the streets. But beyond the carnival atmosphere, another influence is impossible to ignore here in Rio: religion. Religious symbolism and iconography is everywhere, from small neighbourhood churches to the massive Christ the Redeemer statue watching over the city. But religion doesn't just shape belief systems here, it also, perhaps more importantly, shapes politics. In recent years, under former President Bolsonaro, conservative religious rhetoric has become closely tied to political power, with perhaps one of the most prominent examples of this being seen during the COVID pandemic, where Bolsonaro dismissed the virus as a little flu, telling people to pray it away. But Brazil eventually recorded around 700,000 COVID deaths, the second highest total in the world. And yet faith remains deeply woven into everyday life in Brazil. It's a country of many beliefs and religions, with around 80% of Brazilians identifying with the Christian faith. While Catholicism has long dominated, evangelical Christianity has grown rapidly, rising from around 5% of the population in the 1960s to nearly a third today. These churches are particularly influential in poorer communities, and their teachings often shape public attitudes on issues like LGBTQ+ rights, abortion, and gender identity, which means that for many queer people in Brazil, their relationship with faith can be complicated. And that's what brings me to Lapa, a neighbourhood in Rio that's home to Brazil's so-called first gay church.
Okay, so we are now off to Lapa to interview Marcus Gladstone, who set up the Contemporary Christian Church. And interestingly, this church was set up in 2006. It was the original base for the church, but they have since expanded and they have gone to loads of different locations in Rio, but also all around Brazil. So it really is a movement, it's having a moment, and I'm just excited to see where the conversation goes. Marcus, this is the first church that you set up in Lapa, right? In 2006?
Yes.
Yeah?
This is our first church. 20 years ago, we did our first inclusive service here.
Yeah?
At Lapa, Rio de Janeiro.
So you're celebrating a birthday this year?
Yes, in September, 20 years.
20 years, okay, wow. And would you mind just telling me a bit about what are we looking at here? You know, because I've seen that all of the churches that you have this beautiful blue sky. Like, what's the symbolism?
We don't want to be only a church for LGBTQ plus people, but for everybody. And our goal is take everybody to heaven. So when the people come here, they will see heaven.
The celebration of life and what comes after it. So what have we got going on here then?
This is something of our values. We try to bring to the gay community values, follow the gospel of Jesus Christ and teach them everything about Jesus and the Bible. I did postgraduate in theology, but I specialized in inclusive theology.
How would you explain inclusive theology?
Another view of the orthodox or conservative theology that we have today. So we teach that some part of the Bible was manipulated, mistranslated in some parts to avoid gay people and the LGBTQ plus people in the Bible or in the church.
So Marcus, would you mind just telling us a bit about yourself and your own journey with accepting your sexuality?
I was born in a non-practicing Catholic family. At the age 14, I attempted against my life, tried suicide because I was unhappy. I had a deep encounter with Jesus Christ. After this, I started to struggle with my sexuality, my faith in my sexuality. And then at that time, the church didn't have me the answers.
So obviously evangelism is incredibly popular in Brazil. What do you think has caused such a big spike, such a big growth in evangelism over the past few years?
The evangelicals are very close to the people. This is different from the other traditional churches. They are where the poor people are. They are more connected with them. This is what the evangelicals do. They are there.
Because I've read as well that places, you know, in the middle of nowhere in this country, they might not even have a shop, they might not have a hospital, but there's an evangelical church.
Yes. Many churches are doing a good job, doing a social work there, but two problems we have. They don't accept the LGBTQ plus community, and now they are mixing politics with religion. The leaders started to use this to manipulate votes, elections, and this is the problem.
So just picking up on the Bolsonaro thing, people said that he was chosen by God. How does that make you feel?
I feel concerned when people use the gospel to elect politicians.
At the time of filming this documentary, you know, we can see what's happening in the USA with the Trump administration and how religion is kind of being woven into politics. You know, when you watch the news and how people are using religion in a political way, what does it make you feel?
If Jesus was here, he will be very, very reactive against those people.
Do you think that they have a place in the church, people like that?
I think that they don't thinking about Jesus. They are there for to use the institution, not to bring love and to feel connected with God. Faith should heal, not hurt. No one should have to choose between loving God and being who they are.
Yeah. What are some of the changes when people do come here, if they have been rejected by other evangelical churches? What are some of the positive changes that you see people go through?
They feel accepted as they are. They feel the love of God. In the beginning, we have a prostitute, a transgender prostitute, and was my first big struggle, not a struggle, but desafio. I can say, I don't know how to say in English like this, but she came here and her mother came with her. She put food inside of home, gave them food, family, house, supporting everything. So how we can be against a person who did like all this thing her family.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by what Father Marcus had to say. It's clear that the contemporary Christian church is life-changing for queer people who feel cast out elsewhere. It builds an extraordinary sense of community and helps to challenge some of the deep-set anti-LGBTQ+ beliefs that some of the churches in Brazil seem to preach. But perhaps more frighteningly, it's striking to hear about the sheer force of religious influence when it comes to politics and political power. It seems they are indeed deeply, and sometimes problematically, entwined. But this leads me to my next question. How do these huge world-altering factors shape the day-to-day lives of queer women in Rio? I'm off to meet up with Tamires Duarte, founder and owner of a local queer and cultural hotspot called Novo West, to find out.
Hola. Hey. Hey, Rosie. So Tamires, this is not the first time that I've actually been in this bar. I visited like 2 years ago and I had no idea, obviously, that you existed and that this was such a wonderful place. Why did you set up this space in the first place?
Well, I moved to Santa Teresa, which is a very artistic neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I was just recently divorced and I was alone. And there was two things was missing here. One, burgers. They didn't sell anywhere.
And nobody at all sold burgers?
No good burgers. And a place where I could feel like more comfort.
Yeah.
You know, queer space.
Am I right in saying it doesn't scream that it's an LGBT queer bar? Is that a purposeful decision?
The bars that existed before, like in Rio,
yeah,
they were kind of only women's only. And I don't believe that diversity, it's like when you just exclude someone. So my idea was to create a space where that would be like naturally understood only by the way that people working here and how you're treated. And, you know, it's more like the idea is to feel welcome, not excluded at all.
You're a queer woman, you're here in Brazil. What are some of the challenges that you think the community are facing right now?
Brazil is the country that kills the most LGBTs in the world for more than a decade. So I think that the trans community is the one who is suffering more. So it's very hard to see trans people like working in normal, like anywhere. It's difficult to see. And you know, I'm a white woman, lesbian woman, cis woman, so we cannot understand everything, but I can see and I try to do something to change that. But in terms of violence, still complicated. Not from me, because, you know, I fight it a lot and I don't feel like afraid. But that was like a philosophy. But I need to fight for people who are in this type of situations, you know.
And how do you feel? Obviously, Bolsonaro is not, you know, in ruling the state right now. Lula is. Like, how do you feel that things have improved or not improved, you know, now that that change has taken place?
I think we never had that division, that clear division before. So we kind of got very hurt when Bolsonaro came. But when that happened, people like segregate, like literally. Like I stopped talking to my father for 2 years.
Wow.
We had the COVID. The situation got really bad. It was almost like a depression, like a common depression. And then when Lula got elected, I was here with a bucket of water, throwing it at everyone. And we got like, oh man, thank God. It was like such a relief. But in the same time, he still represents that division, like the two. And I don't believe in that, you know. I really believe in something that can communicate. If you try to stop to communicate, this is just my point of view.
It's great to hear how Tamires and her bar are supporting queer women, but I couldn't make this documentary without talking to one of Brazil's most targeted groups, the trans community. Brazil has progressive laws for gender diverse people, including legal gender recognition without surgery, but the reality is more nuanced. For 18 years running, Brazil has recorded the highest number of murders of trans and gender diverse people in the world, making up an average of 30% of all murders of trans people worldwide each year. I'm going to hear from Nick, a Rio local. I want to understand what life is like for a trans woman living here in Brazil.
So Tamiris and Nikki, how did you guys meet each other?
Foi uma festa de Réveillon, que eu tinha recém chegado no Rio de Janeiro. Eu não conhecia muitas pessoas, eu não entendia muito como funcionava o lugar, não tinha conhecimento nenhum. E eu tinha um amigo que eu tinha recém conhecido aqui, que me chamou para ir para essa festa de Réveillon, na qual ela estava também. E foi incrível, assim, a festa onde eu pude conhecer várias pessoas e conhecer lugares também. E foi muito incrível a experiência de ter conhecido ela. She's my mother.
Can you talk about the differences of being, trans in a rural environment versus why you moved to Rio?
E a diferença é isso, tipo, o ambiente de lugar pequeno e lugar grande, sabe? A cabeça das pessoas são mais abertas. Do lugar grande, lugar pequeno, elas não têm muito conhecimento sobre o que está acontecendo no mundo fora, o que está realmente rolando por todos os lugares, assim. E aqui eu consegui crescer, evoluir como pessoa, consegui conquistar espaços, desenvolver mais a minha arte, mais a minha pessoa, o meu ser.
Even though you are in Rio now, in a much bigger place, what are the challenges that you face as a trans person here?
Sim, eu sofro muito olhares de todo tipo de pessoas, homens, mulheres, todo mundo que passa. Eu sinto esses olhares pesados, assim, uma energia negativa, sabe? E também tem os olhares de admirações também, que a gente não pode deixar de lado, por mais que a gente viva num país onde mais mata pessoas trans e tal. É diferente. Todo dia, quando eu saio de casa, é uma luta diferente, porque ser mulher trans no Brasil é isso, você enfrentar várias questões, várias coisas, desafios de a vida, né? A gente não pode desistir nunca. Não pode parar. First stop.
But aside, from the challenges, do you have any stories of joy since you've moved to Rio? What's been a really happy moment for you?
Você será agora? Sim. Por ser uma mulher trans, a gente nunca acredita que a gente pode ser amada, que a gente pode ter um amor, sabe, concreto, um amor que realmente demonstra o sentimento. E eu achei que isso não era possível. E depois de um tempo eu comecei a namorar e entendi que realmente a gente pode ser amada, que a gente pode ser cuidada, que a gente pode amar também. Por mais que a gente passe por tanto processo, sabe, que a gente acaba desacreditando que realmente existe amor, sabe? Mas no final a gente entende que o amor, a gente tem que vir da gente, de fato. A gente precisa se amar de dentro para fora. Então, quando a gente se ama, a gente consegue ser amada também. Existem grupos de pessoas que julgam pessoas trans, que julgam, tipo, pessoas gays julgam pessoas trans, sabe? Então, para que haja uma mudança, tem que vir de dentro para fora, da própria comunidade, começar a apoiar, começar a se cuidar, agir como se fosse uma família, porque a gente é uma família de verdade, a gente se cuida. Então, eu acho que isso, para que haja uma mudança, todos precisam se apoiar da própria comunidade, porque tem que vir o apoio de dentro, não de fora.
What change would you like to see for the queer community here in Brazil? What are your hopes for the future?
Espaços culturais, espaços que acolham pessoas trans, não só pessoas trans, mas pessoas que acolher pessoas, sabe? Eu acho que isso é muito importante, a gente acolher, a gente abraçar e a gente cuidar de quem a gente ama. Eu acho que a revolução só está começando. Estamos presentes para mudar todo o contexto, toda a história. Até mesmo porque a gente não veio agora, a gente não nasceu agora, a gente está há muito tempo. Então não é isso, a gente está se fortalecendo e a gente está no caminho certo.
Hearing Nick talk about her experience of moving to Rio really moved me. It's clear there's so much joy and happiness to be accessed when you really find your people. But this got me thinking about what other queer women in Rio are doing to affect real change, not just on the micro level, but the wider web of activism. So I'm having a drink with 3 very inspiring ladies, each with their own fascinating stories of resistance to share.
So, ladies, obviously you all work in very, very different areas, you know, law, activism, you have a sailing business, it's very inclusive. What are the challenges that you're currently facing or that you feel queer women are facing in Brazil right now?
O maior desafio é o patriarcado. E o que a gente precisa muito é despatriarcalizar o sistema de justiça. Nós temos Lei Maria da Penha, nós temos um protocolo que obriga com todos os julgamentos que eles sejam com perspectiva de gênero. Mas isso é muito bonito no papel, porque enquanto nós tivermos juízes que são homens machistas, de nada adiantam as leis. Então, fazer justiça com as mulheres em geral, e especialmente com as mulheres queer, é um grande desafio.
Já numa perspectiva nas áreas com as quais eu trabalho, por exemplo, na comunicação, eu acho que a gente tem os desafios de regulação das plataformas digitais e das redes que promovem, por um lado, violência e ódio à população queer no Brasil e no mundo, e esse ódio se materializa nas ruas, como a gente vê, porque são as violências simbólicas que se tornam as violências materiais. E alimentação, então nós somos os corpos mais precarizados quando a gente vê essa perspectiva toda. E também na área dos direitos humanos, porque nós somos o país que mais mata pessoas trans, travestis no mundo. E, ao mesmo tempo, somos um país também que não produz dados, subnotifica os dados em relação às violências e às mortes das mulheres lésbicas e bissexuais. A gente sequer tem dados oficiais, então acho que nós temos também um desafio que é enfrentar o apagamento tanto da falta de dados oficiais quanto da falta de políticas públicas.
Bolsonaro's politics have long cast a shadow on LGBTQ plus rights in this country. Do you feel like Lula is doing anything to combat that? Do you think he's doing enough? What do you think the gaps are?
Eu esperava muito do Lula porque, por exemplo, no Supremo Tribunal Federal, todos os ministros que ele indicou eram homens brancos. Hoje, na Suprema Corte, nós temos 11 pessoas, 10 homens brancos e uma mulher branca, né? Ou seja, um tribunal constitucional onde na Constituição nós temos o direito à igualdade e o tribunal que ele é o guardião da Constituição, se ele próprio não tem a representatividade do direito que ele guarda, então, enfim, essa é uma crítica.
A diferença, eu acho que todos o movimento da direita hoje em dia está colocando nossa vida dessa maneira. Uma coisa muito louca que aconteceu aqui no Rio, por exemplo, na época que o Bolsonaro foi eleito, foi também simultânea à pandemia, então era uma situação bem inestável que era terminando. Teve muita gente da comunidade queer que celebrou o casamento delas por medo a esse direito ser retirado da gente. Quando a gente pensa no governo Bolsonaro, a gente tem que pensar que, por exemplo, um dos primeiros atos dele ao ser eleito foi a extinção das diretrizes para a população LGBT no Brasil. Foi a extinção de todos os conselhos de participação popular, incluindo o Conselho Nacional de Política LGBTQ+. Porque quando o político institucionaliza o ódio a determinada população na sua fala, ele está institucionalizando uma política de ódio para um país todo.
How do you think joy and how do you think that community and how do you think connection can uplift us? Like if we put all of that, you know, well, not to one side, but, you know, we look at the other side of things.
Eu acho que o que me inspira é o fato de encontrar pessoas iguais, que pensam da mesma forma, que veem que o que a gente tem, o que nos é dado, não nos serve. E o que nos é dado, a gente vai transformar. E por mais difícil que isso seja, a nossa união em termos de visibilidade, de transformação da realidade, eu vejo pessoas, sabe, super empenhadas em ver isso eu não aceito, não importa o que me custe, mas eu vou fazer o que eu posso para mudar o que nós vivemos. Eu acho que o que me inspira são as mulheres queer que eu conheço.
Para mim, o que me inspira é ver que tem outra pessoa que também luta e que chega junto, isso é muito tirado,
e os resultados, até a formação. O efeito das ações que a gente vem fazendo e das breves lutas, nossas curtas cidades, mas ver o resultado dessa coisa, ver impacto direto, ver criança tendo tempo livre, criança tendo acesso a coisas que não tem acesso, jovens indo para a universidade dentro do projeto educacional que eu tenho. Então, ver vida se transformando é a força. Acho que o que me inspira é a força da solidariedade, porque eu acho que a gente vive em um mundo capitalista, individualista, e que cada vez piora, se aprofunda, principalmente com a ascensão das redes sociais, das plataformas, que vão muito para o individualismo também. Então, eu acho que o que me inspira é a solidariedade, a nossa capacidade de compor comunidades, de pensar um bem viver possível e que as pessoas possam, enfim, ser felizes.
Não tem como a gente ir adiante se a gente não souber sobre memória, de onde viemos. E não tem como a gente importar um feminismo branco europeu para a realidade da América Latina. O feminismo comunitário, ele diz assim, não importa qualquer lugar que uma mulher estiver lutando contra a opressão que ela sofre, é feminismo. Mas a gente não pode dizer como que cada uma deve lutar, porque cada realidade é diferente. Então, no seu bairro, tipo, na sua rua, o que você pode fazer para mudar? Né? Qual é o seu problema? Vendo a partir do que funciona com cada micro realidade, cada micro espaço.
So Tamiris and her friends have obviously created such a beautiful community space in Santa Teresa. It feels like such a safe place, full of joy, full of life, and just people from different walks of life just coming together and really connecting. And obviously, you know, she's put that together as a queer woman, but it has made me think more about the role of gay men, and particularly cis white gay men in the queer community, and what they do to support, you know, trans women, queer women, non-binary people. So I'm off to an iconic queer venue here in Rio. It's called Pink Flamingo, and it's run by somebody called Tiago. And I have been a few times before. I have had a few nights out in Pink Flamingo when I have been to Rio before, so I'm really excited to go back and just ask him some questions, just see what he thinks the role of, you know, gay men in supporting queer women and trans women is.
Way before Pink Flamingo came about, I have always been a gay man, and I have been working as a DJ then, a party producer, since 2010. A long time ago. I was like so young back then. So I started to grow as a DJ, and I had opportunities to DJ outside of Rio and then outside of Brazil. And then I went working in New York City, working in Santiago, Chile. I was like, well, Rio only have like bars or clubs. I want to find a place similar to the scene I was working in New York City, where the parties would happen at the bar. And then Rio didn't have that. So Pink Flamingo arrived to welcome Rio to this new era of bars and parties. It was about having a safe place for our community, especially because Rio is such a diverse and international city. I feel like people that are not from Brazil, not from Rio, they feel like they are from Rio even though they're not Brazilians.
Yeah.
Rio is like one of the few cities in the world that people feel like they belong. We don't even do a good job marketing as an LGBT city, you know, but LGBT people come to Rio, and then I wanted to do things as a DJ that I was not allowed to, because all the people that were hiring me, they would say no to putting drag queens, no to putting my trans dancers, no to opening more opportunities than just white gay guys, you know. I wanted to do more. I know now that as a gay man and as a white person in Brazil, we are the least of the problems. We have so many other things that we need to address as a community that I felt like we needed a place that would, of course, be a party place, a fun place, but also be a community and be a place and become part of the lifestyle of the LGBT community in Rio.
What do you think the biggest differences are between being a gay man and being a queer woman or a queer trans woman in Rio, in Brazil?
Well, we live in a sexist society, I know that it's easier for men Even though I'm gay, it's still easier for me. But for example, my head photographer for all of my businesses is a lesbian woman, because I think she has a different way of looking at our scene, and then she doesn't just focus on the hot guys. She brings like the diversity we need to show. And some of our drag queens along the way, they discovered themselves as trans women. They are the stars of our place.
What do you think people in the queer community, regardless however you identify, can help and support trans women at the moment?
What I think that we need to give them jobs, first of all, because it's so hard as a trans woman, because I have so many friends and they tell me I need to work, and then I have done my part in hiring these people, because not only a trans woman but also trans men also, you know, because we've had like trans men in the bar as a cashier, we've had like trans men as DJs, but like we have like so many trans women working with us, and they tell us that it's really hard to find jobs outside, because we're kind of a fairy tale land. Pink Flamingo has become like a place that everyone feels welcomed and everyone feels a part of us, but it's not easy to find it even in other gay spaces in Rio. Like I mind finding LGBT people and having them work with us, not only on stage but like in our operational team, you know. But I don't think this is a culture that other places celebrate, and I try to be a good example.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to hear Tiago's journey with Pink Flamingo and how much he truly cares about creating a safe space for everyone, both inside and outside of the community. And in my opinion, having people show up like this is imperative to starting the wheels in motion to create real change. But talking about real change, I wanted to meet one of his most popular dancers at the club, Jenny, whose journey to performing on stage is an interesting and incredibly inspiring one.
So Jenny, I've heard so much about you. You started off as a cashier here and now you're one of the club's well-known dancers and performers. Can you tell us about your journey and your story here?
Para mim é muito importante estar aqui hoje, porque eu passei por várias adversidades na minha vida, como toda mulher passa, como toda mulher trans também passa. E o Pink Flamingo apareceu pra mim no momento que eu precisava muito, porque eu tava vivendo uma situação de rua mesmo, uma situação bem difícil. Como toda pessoa trans, eu tive problemas na minha casa, com os meus pais, com a minha família. Na verdade, só com a minha família paterna, porque minha mãe mora bem longe, ela mora lá do outro lado do país. E como eu não tinha minha mãe por perto, acabaram acontecendo muitas coisas ruins, porque eu não tinha alguém da família ali para me proteger o tempo inteiro. Então, quem mais devia me proteger foi quem mais fez coisas ruins comigo e me levaram a passar todas essas adversidades que eu passei, coisas muito tristes mesmo, sabe? Envolvendo a prostituição, as ruas e muita coisa difícil, que foi muito, muito, muito trabalhoso para contornar isso e dizer, tipo, não, comigo vai ser diferente, sabe? E aí eu decidi fazer diferente e procurar algo que me levasse a alcançar os meus objetivos, a poder realizar os meus sonhos, que no caso foi quando eu comecei a trabalhar de carteira assinada, que é uma conquista muito grande, apesar de ser uma coisa muito pequena para pessoas cis, para nós é uma coisa muito grandiosa, muito única, assim, quando a gente consegue pela primeira vez esse feito.
We can't talk about this without acknowledging the fact that Brazil has one of the highest rates of murders for trans people in the world. How do you feel when you hear that statistic?
É muito difícil, né, lidar com essas coisas, principalmente com as notícias, porque pra gente, quando chega uma notícia de que uma das nossas morreu, é como se chegasse uma notícia que um bebê estivesse nascendo, sabe? Todo mundo morre todo dia, mas as pessoas trans estão morrendo em muito maior quantidade, assim. Eu já perdi muitas amigas, muitos amigos também, simplesmente por serem quem são. Então é muito difícil. Às vezes chega uma notícia de uma pessoa que você nem conhece, de uma pessoa que você nunca teve uma troca, mas só de ela ser uma pessoa trans, dela dividir a mesma luta que você, faz você se questionar se amanhã vai ser você, sabe?
So hearing you say that then, how do you have hope? What's your advice to other trans people if they feel deeply saddened by these statistics, which of course are incredibly harrowing.
Quando eu tinha 16 anos e eu me entendi uma pessoa trans, eu ouvi de uma travesti de 60 anos uma frase que eu nunca vou esquecer na minha vida. E ela me disse que as travestis são eternas e que elas vivem umas nas outras. E eu acho que isso é a minha maior inspiração da vida. Eu carrego isso comigo não só como um lema, mas para mim como um versículo bíblico, assim. Eu levo isso comigo pro resto da minha vida. E eu acho que é o jeito da gente inspirar e também se inspirar umas nas outras, assim. Porque eu tô aqui no palco do Pink Flamingo e sempre que tem uma menina trans ali me assistindo, eu sinto como se eu pudesse dizer, você também tá aqui, sabe? Assim como todo dia eles tentam nos matar, todos os dias nós estamos aí tentando viver umas nas outras.
What do you want people to know outside of Brazil about what your experience is like as a trans woman living here?
Acho que o brasileiro em si, a gente tem uma força muito única. E eu acho que a imagem que eu quero passar para todas as pessoas trans, aí o mundo afora, é que a gente pode resistir sendo linda, sendo forte, sendo corajosa. E que só basta a gente viver a nossa vida da forma mais leve e alegre que a gente puder, porque é isso que vai fazer a nossa força. Então, acho que mesmo dentro de uma dificuldade da vida, né? Porque, como a gente já falou sobre isso, o Brasil é um dos países que mais matam pessoas trans. A gente consegue viver e ser feliz e ter as nossas conquistas. Então, eu acho que essa é a mensagem. É você, mesmo dentro de todo o caos, conseguir ser positiva, ser alegre, ser feliz e buscar amor, afeto, carinho e etc.
I'm saddened, but I'm not shocked by some of the things that Jenny had to say. Transphobia and anti-trans violence are on the rise in many parts of the world, with real and sometimes deadly consequences for those who experience it. But there are people and places here in Brazil who want to change this. Casanem is a community-based citizenship centre that supports queer individuals, cisgender women experiencing violence, and other at-risk groups. During the COVID pandemic, Casanem organised a network of shelters for LGBTQ+ people. Today it offers educational programmes, social support, group discussions, and much more. Similarly, Connex LG is an organisation located in the Mare Favela in Rio de Janeiro. It offers training and services in human rights, advocacy, and citizenship promotion for LGBTQ+ people, especially Black trans women. The organisation also empowers local activists to combat discrimination and violence in their communities. And these spaces are highly important. They don't just offer support, they create community. After everything I've learned here about queer rights being eroded and lives made more precarious, one thing keeps resurfacing: community. Again and again, people talk about the power of being seen, of being held by others, of finding spaces that don't just protect you, but lift you up. And I've learnt that in Brazil, joy itself can be an act of resistance. And though everyone is different, and there are a seemingly endless range of different battles being fought, every single act of resistance creates a web of change. Churches that empower their congregations, queer men standing alongside women, women amplifying trans voices. Even in the middle of political uncertainty, there's a refusal to disappear and a determination to take up space loudly and visibly. Though Rio isn't representative of the whole of Brazil, there's a feeling of change in the air here, of progress, of hope, of joy and resistance. And after all, what is pride if not a protest? There are blueprints here for change, and I for one am truly inspired, excited and grateful I get to witness this revolution.